This time I'd like to ask our superintendent to lead us in our prayer and pledge.
Our Father, we're grateful for the blessings of life. We're thankful for this opportunity to be here to work with the administrators and teachers and the board and parents and concerned citizens of this county. Be with us in all that we do. Give us the wisdom to say and do the things that are most beneficial to our school system. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. This time I'd like to welcome my visitors. I'd like to say that if anybody's got something that we feel like a non-agenda item, I got something I want to address the board with, now's the time to do that. Yes, ma'am?
I wanted to bring up an interesting thing that happened. My son was just recently bullied. The schools were wonderful. It was like intertime school. My son's in second grade. It was a sixth grader that was bullying my son. Both principals at both schools worked diligently to make sure that this wasn't going to happen again. The instance occurred on the bus. One of my concerns with that is another instance happened on the bus with my son, where a 17-year-old was telling him words to say, and my son was saying them because he didn't realize that these were really bad words to say. And I wanted to talk about maybe having a consideration where the high schoolers either have a stagger start where they don't ride the same bus as the elementary school kids, where the kids would be separated on the bus. I understand that they're supposed to, in theory, be separated on the bus already, but a 17-year-old was sitting next to an 8-year-old on the bus. I understand that budgeting may not allow for this, so also I want to suggest maybe putting monitors on buses where there are problems, where there's a lot of complaint of students either being mistreated or bullied, or, I mean, there are stories that I've heard on our bus of kids tripping other kids, and there's not a monitor on our bus. So
monitor, are you referring to a person or a camera?
a person, I know there's cameras on the bus, but that's being reactive, not proactive. You only go back and look at the cameras when a parent comes along and complains that something's happened to their child. I'm talking about preventing stuff from happening, because I can't unteach my kid those words. I can't unpunch my kid in the groin when things like this happen. So I'm proposing that maybe something like that be looked at.
We certainly share your concern that the second grader is treated properly on the bus. And
Anybody.
man,
Anybody, any child. I'm sure my
Yes,
kid's
sir.
not the only one
Yeah.
being bullied.
yeah. And, you know, and we have looked at a lot of these things that you're suggesting. And you are right, the cost is prohibitive to some degree. But there are certainly other things that we can look at and address, and we'll work closely with the schools to try to make sure that we're doing the best job we can. And
Like I said, I think that, Principal Beecham's hands were tied because she couldn't do anything because the child that was bullying my son is in sixth grade. So we had to go over and talk to Mr. Lott about that. And so being that it was both schools involved, I think it was handled by our teachers and our principal wonderfully. I have no complaint against that. It's just
I understand.
something better.
I understand what you're saying, and we'll continue to work at it and try to do a better job. I thank you for coming forward
Oh, thank
and
you.
sharing that with us.
Thank you, ma'am. I thank you too as well. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Edison.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think you received some draft policies for revision and actual new policies. Does anybody need any copies? Pick up the package. Okay. Just want to go over a few of these and what I eventually I need to do is ask for permission to advertise. But I kind of want to give you the gist of why we're doing some of these things. Board policy 2.05, and just like Mr. Turner pointed out a couple of meetings ago about asking for public input, this is recommended to be put in the policy. And I do have a question for you. If you see the last line of that, new parent A, it says rules established by the board in accordance with foreign statutes, talking about opportunity to speak and how that is. And I know that at the NEFAC Board of Directors meeting, it has language in their policy or on their things about somebody that wants to speak on an item, they got 3 minutes to speak on a topic and no more than 20 minutes total on a certain topic. Do you want any time limit language like that in the policy, any kind of recommendations for that?
I personally don't think so, and my reasoning why is because we just had a concerned parent that, you know, I think they do have a right to come and address our board and to speak, and I don't think sometimes we have enough visitors and enough people come and enough community support that really takes an interest, and I don't want to limit or, you know, hold anybody back, and that's my opinion, and I'll, you know, look at everybody else's, but I mean, I think that needs to be left in the hands of the chair, and they can address it, you know, situation and just say, you know, I'm sorry, you know, this is getting lengthy because we do have other business, but to put it in a policy where we have to, you know, limit a concern, that valid concern, I would say no.
That's up to you. That's not here, and that's why I asked the question.
And I think Mr. Brookins got a very good point, because, you know, the chair he can handle that part, but we don't want to cut anybody short. You know, we want them to say what they got to say, because obviously if they think it's important enough to go, we need all the things important enough to listen.
That's exactly right.
But if that's the direction we're looking to go in, I think that does need to be included in the language, that the chair, you know, as the appropriate response if the conversation is getting too lengthy and not really saying anything. All those of us that have been on the board at least a couple of terms have dealt with situations where certain persons have just gotten up and spoken and been redundant and spoken and been more redundant. So,
Read letters from other people.
yeah, that is correct. So while I agree that we don't necessarily need a timed, you know, number, put the responsibility on the chair to make the determination after a while that you said all you really need to say in a nice way, of course.
But I don't think that necessarily would need to be in policy, Mr. Chairman.
I felt like that's implied, but because we follow Robert's Rules of Order, which gives the chairman
That's
discretion
right.
to do so.
That's what I think.
That's sort of, without flat out spelling it out, we just sort of know that when we apply with Robert's Rules of Order, which is laid out in the policy.
Yeah, it's not. However you want to do it.
Yeah.
Rules, statutes, obligations.
But that's, I would think like if that was just either wrong through the board or that, with starting, would that be, could we infer that from wrong through the order or?
I think that you could, the situation you want to avoid is where there's a concern that there's so much discretion being put on the board chair that maybe some people feel like, well, I got cut off before I really had a chance to say my piece, but somebody else at another meeting got a chance to talk as much as they wanted. And if you put that guideline in there, I think it's still waivable by the board chair, but you can put it in there as a guideline that folks addressing the board. And I know a lot of other school districts do that they ask them to limit their comments to 3 or 5 minutes. And generally, 15 or 20 minutes or whatever it is will be reserved for public comment. And I think that would be waivable by the chair if there's a particular issue that had generated a lot of public interest. And that then, if you have some guidelines in place, it sort of takes away the suggestion that the chair is maybe playing favorites with the public comment.
And would it be permissible for the chair to state that before the conversation ever begins?
Sure, and this would be one way to go about doing it, is having some guidelines in here about typical comment period. And that's frequently repeated at board meetings, they'll say that. But the direct answer to your question, if you want to keep doing what you're doing, redundant or people are reading letters and so forth. You can all that.
I like the statement that the chair, who is nominated by the board and has the direction of the board, and, you know, that they can say, certainly that person has time to speak, but they also, you know, they have the authority to stop it if it's, you know, getting out of hand, because we have business to conduct.
So you think it needs to be that specific, that?
No, I think it means, I like it this way, and the chair handles
I like
it.
the way it is right now.
I do too,
Just like it is.
yeah.
Good.
And so that is the rule that we're establishing in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order.
Just following Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. That's what we already do.
All right, board policy 3.06, the attempt here is to bring together certain things. This time of year, as you know, we do security drills. And you also know that we have a, what we call it in our house, the NECAT flip chart. The flip chart that outlines how we're supposed to act, or things, procedures we're supposed to follow in the event of emergency. Okay? And also at this time of year, I'm waiting to receive from the Office of Safe Schools, the Safe School Reporter, also known as the OGRA report, which will come to you after you fill it out, and you all will approve. So what we're trying to do here is bring together a lot of practices and put it into a policy where it should be. And just really the only new thing is paren 2, where it essentially says that who's going to, the emergency agency that's going to respond in the company of agency that they'll respond, or emergency they'll respond to. But other than that, these are safety procedures that we already do. And procedures are in place. So I'd like to rename this policy and then put in the policy all the things that we follow already.
On this number 1, orderly environment, where it says, where we've scratched out, we have, unless they are in compliance with policy 1106,
Yes, sir.
visitor, does 1106 basically just say what we have scratched out?
Yeah, that's where they come in, yes, sir, and register in the front office, the process for visiting the campus. Board policy 3.10, this is a recommended change. Every year, there's a debate about, shall we put the flag up, shall we put the flag down, how should we do it? And what the policy says, or what the rule says, is suitable guidelines. You can see right here, flag shall be displayed according to guidelines established by whom, is what the thing says. Well, we're just putting the whom in here as the Florida Department of State, because we are a state agency, and the state agency directs us that we should fly the flag at half-staff or not.
Now, can I ask another question here?
Yes, sir.
The policy on the flag, do they, I mean, I know we can't make them pledge allegiance to the flag, but don't they have to stand up? I mean, I know, like I say, we can't make them pledge, but don't they have to stand up? And stand there like, just, they don't, like I say, I've heard it 4 times already, so,
Right.
you know what I'm talking about?
I believe that we asked the students to stand up, and I don't know if you can make them stand up, that's not in our policy, but that is the respectful thing to do.
Or what if they don't? What if it's policy here, then they have to, right, or else they'll leave somewhere.
I think you'll get into a, Councilman?
I haven't researched this issue lately, but my understanding, the last time I looked at it, is that you cannot compel somebody to stand up, or you can't discipline them for not standing. However, students being disrespectful or disruptive during the pledge, drawing attention to themselves, if they're just sitting there quietly, that's not a basis for disciplining them.
So you don't think sitting there is disrespectful?
That's not my personal opinion. I think that is the opinion of the appeals courts who have looked at this issue and they're trying to balance someone's religious freedom or right to political expression versus the right to make them say the pledge.
Okay.
Don't they have to produce letter saying it's against their religious belief to be exempt.
I would need to confirm that, and I'd be happy to take a look at that report back.
Please, I wish you would.
All right.
Well, that's our second.
That's our policy, that's in our policy.
Here.
That's in our policy, I just wanna make sure that that would hold up.
I'll take a look.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. 3.12 is just a little bit of an update about public inspection records and when something, when a complaint actually becomes public. Okay. 3.58, let me give a little narrative about this policy before we go. Every summer, we have laws that change, and then we have to have an interpretation of what the laws are. And in this particular policy, the bullying and harassment policy, this is one that we have to send our response to the state, and the state has to approve our policy changes. So what you have here is what has been sent to the state for approval. And if they don't approve it, then we have to change it. But this is one of the policies that has to be approved by the state. And this is language that is essentially is reacting to all of the, as you have seen, the different forms of technology that's out there and kids' misuse of it. Matter of fact, I sat on an hour-long conference call on how to self-monitor compliance to it. Policy 6.0, excuse me, policy 6.011 is a recommendation. You know, this policy and the next policy comes through the personnel department. As you know, there's a new law requiring the superintendent board members to complete an annual ethics training. So we thought it would be wise to put on the ethics in the policy for everybody else.
So you're saying that all personnel needs to go through the ethics training?
Well, it is-
Basically the same kind that we went through?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Dean, but I do know that all new employees have to go through the ethics training, and that's done at the beginning of the school year.
When it first-
Education.
When it first came out, I went to every school, catch all that were currently hired in the new employee orientation.
But I don't believe they have to have an annual updates to job site.
And so this one, we're gonna have the annual updates.
No, you and the superintendent are required to have an annual update. This doesn't say that, this is essentially that they're going to be receiving ethics training.
Yes, but it does say that. No free.
That's for you. Yes, sir.
Right. No.
But not all employees.
Okay.
Well, I certainly agree with, we all need it. I need it certainly. But, is there, at some point, are we gonna address social media with employees? We never have done a policy, Facebooks and like Twitter, those kind of things. I mean, are we kind of going that direction with policies and looking at that and, where do we get to them? At some point, it needs to happen. It's hard to monitor, it's hard, I don't have an answer, but I'm asking, and there's a need.
I can tell you what we've discussed, and we've talked about electronic devices in the classroom and everything else, we had a cell phone policy and everything else. And, when it's the teacher's time, if they want to check Facebook, then they can do so. Now, if the teacher is supposed to be instructing and supervising,
Right,
and they're not doing so, then that's another issue.
right, that is.
And you are right about code of ethics, where teachers are responsible for what they put out there after hours.
Yeah, because it is a reflection on the school, and it's a reflection on the community, and it's an example for students. That's my opinion. I do feel strongly about it, that's my opinion.
I feel very strongly about it, but I also feel that we really good. There are some constitutional rights with that.
have,
I'll tell you another thing, that
Thanks
social
for that.
media,
Thanks for that.
social media is changing so rapidly at
Yeah.
the present time until if you want to write a policy on Facebook and Twitter, you're behind times.
That's right.
These youngins are past that.
and if you look at the last sentence in parent one here, it says the board should also expect all administrative, instructional and support staff members to adhere to the code of ethics of the education profession of Florida and the principles of professional conduct of the education profession in Florida. And I believe if we have people adhering to those code of ethics, then I don't believe we're going to be having those violations of Florida. If that's, those violation of ethics is in work policy as a reason for disciplinary action. Am I right, Candy?
Yes.
But you're right. Six point oh two is a report of misconduct. Basically, it's if you, it talks about the role and responsibility of the superintendent and roles and responsibility of educators in reporting misconduct to child abuse. It also talks about employment references in here, that's a very big one. And I do think I need to make a change here on this, but in Brandon one, says report to the superintendent. This dean instructs the people to, if there's a report of misconduct, call her. So if it's okay, I would like to put this report to the director of personnel, if that's okay with the superintendent. Superintendent will designate.
Yeah, that's why, we're not.
That's why I have it designated.
Right.
So what were you saying, assume the designee will cover that, or you want?
Yes, well, the designee will be Ms. Dean.
I'm saying, we tell them in this county to report to Ms. Dean, and when you say the superintendent or his designee, that covers that.
Questions? This policy 8.03 is a result of change in legislation. And we have the fire marshal actually doing inspections. And the policy 8.15 is correct here. Policy 9.02 is just an update. You know, we have a no texting law. And so that is just putting that law into our policy. If you're driving the county vehicle, you shouldn't be driving any vehicle with texting. But
You ever watch Mr. Hayes? Text.
Never text, but I have.
9.11 is,
Before you go on,
yes, sir, I'm sorry.
automotive equipment, is that inclusive of buses? Or is this a separate category from the government?
We have a policy on that. Steve, you want to address that?
You're talking about the vans that they want to use?
Well, on buses, about bus drivers texting while they drive.
Oh, no, that's
That's a,
bad.
What I'm asking is this policy inclusive of bus drivers on the buses?
All automotive equipment, so that would be every bus, on every vehicle on the bus.
That's for everybody,
Okay, thank you.
full state.
I wanted to double check, so thank you.
I may be way off base here, but that word automotive,
Well, that's the title of the policy, so that's a long one.
okay. We automotive mean car. That gives me, I'm really weird.
But I do believe we have,
A
a
school bus will not even come to my mind.
I do believe we have, and I don't know where it's, is it in the handbook, Steve? But where it talks specifically about texting while driving on school buses.
Yes.
We do have a separate.
Thank you.
Board policy 9.11 is not really saying a whole lot new, it's just trying to make it simpler to read, and so that people can see it and follow it a little closer. And there's a little bit of new language in here, and most of the new language are policies that we already follow by statute or statutory requirements. Okay? But parent 3, draw your attention to there. And this policy, by the way, was drafted in with the help of Mr. Tyson. We always have a question about how many people can I require to put in a van. Okay, well, the law says out here that's a maximum of 10 students. Okay, no fewer than 10 students. In other words, it's called a 10-passenger van, and one more is the driver. So, and that's in one of the laws that's there, or rules. But it also allows us to include the word truck.
Where did I miss the part in here where these were done on a case-by-case basis, approved by the board?
Well, these are not approved by the board anymore. So it's been several years ago, it's the board gave the superintendent that authority to do these.
Unless it's overnight.
Right, if it's overnight, commercial vehicle, or out of state. And there used to be language in a policy about the more than 2 vehicles, but that's.
So trucks are now good to go.
And the law used to say for agricultural purposes.
Do you want that responsibility, so? Well, I said that part, but, my error. Missing, that part.
11.05, this.
I got one question. Mr. Cotton, our vans, will they hold 10 students?
Pardon me?
Our vans, will they hold 10 students?
No. No.
We do have 7-passenger vans, and I think the big ones.
The big ones, they never came with a seat.
Right.
That's, so they can only seat 8. The dealerships can't sell them to us like that. Against the law. For us to have a 10-passenger.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any history of requesting insurance coverage for any of the drivers, like under Department 4?
Yes, sir. Every trip.
Is that something that administratively, would we want to write that in policy?
We have a field trip form that they have to provide their driver's license, insurance card.
Okay.
So that's right here in that 4A.
For 4A, that's how we check that.
Yes, they have to provide us a copy of the insurance and your driver's license. And the reason we ask for trips to be 3 weeks at a time, so we can run the driver's license to the Department of Motor Vehicles. And lastly, but not least, 11.05, just a statutory update. This is an outside entity wants to distribute something to the students. That literature has to be approved by the superintendent at that time.
Any further questions? So you need a motion.
Make a motion to advertise.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Hudson.
If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or please let me know. You will turn that on if you can.
This means the teacher evaluation.
Make this computer right. Not saying that it went to sleep during board policies, but. You have a file folder, a colored file folder
that has some handouts that we'll kind of go over as we go through this. What I'm going to do is just take you through the teacher evaluation process. I'm going to give you just a little bit of background, but no. I got large print up here for you.
Good.
And then the things that are too small, even on that screen, you've got a handout. So you're good. You're good. He's squinting. All right, on the teacher evaluation process, some of this you already have heard. For example, that we use the Danielson model. And the Danielson model was approved by the state. The Levy County evaluation system that was based on the Danielson model was approved by the state, the school board, and the union, because we had union representation at the table as we developed this particular model. If you recall, and you'll see this in your handouts, Danielson has 4 domains. And you'll notice that those 4 domains are Domain 1, planning and preparation. Domain 2 is classroom environment. Domain 3 is instruction. And Domain 4 covers professional responsibilities. Just for a point of reference, if you take a look at the red column and the blue column, the 2 end columns, those are things that you are not readily going to see when you walk into the classroom. But the 2 in the middle, domains 2 and 3, are ones that you will see as you go into the classroom. So on domains 1 and 4, evidence would be collected by the teacher and presented to the principal at time of evaluation or through the school year. For example, the planning and preparation, many of our schools have teachers turning in their lesson plans on a weekly basis, and so those are things that are collected as the year goes on. In order to make sure that our principals fully understand the evaluation tool itself and what we're looking for in the classroom, we've taken our principals through Cambridge training, which has been phenomenal. And I've had an opportunity to go in on 2 of those trainings with administrators, and then also to go in as we train teachers on the evaluation tool, looking at domains 2 and 3 in particular. With the Cambridge training, they actually did this at the sites. The principals joined together, were split into small groups. They walked through classrooms. They took a look at the rubrics, decided where a teacher fell within a rubric, came back, sat down together, debriefed, and made sure that they were evaluating the same way as their peers. There was a lot of good discussion going on in those rooms. There was collaboration or calibration between the administrators at the different Cambridge sites. And then there's ongoing practice through the administrator meetings. One of the things that we've incorporated this year into our principal meetings is posting those at schools. The principals and APs, when it's their turn, they go into the schools, they go through classrooms, and they do the same thing that we were doing with the Cambridge. They go into the classroom, they look, they talk about how teachers would rate on a certain area, and they debrief, so we know that principals are looking for the same things within the different schools across the county. We're also training our instructional personnel. Each year at the beginning of the year, just like any other evaluation tool that we've had, the principal and the AP sit down with the faculty and they share with them the evaluation tool. They can design professional development. Maybe it's around questioning. That might be an area that there's a concern at a school, and so my professional development maybe on the school improvement early release days. That would be an example. Plus, we also had district-wide professional development. And we used Cambridge. We asked them to come out. We paid for them to come out and speak with our teachers. You have a sheet that looks like this without the stickies on it. And this was our professional development offerings that we offer to our teachers. You'll notice on there that we have the Danielson Framework for Teachers. We had 149 teachers that attended that session. Well, actually, 3 sessions. And they went through the same process that we did where they watched videos, they rated it, then there was discussion about the ratings and what they were actually looking for and what would have made a lesson more powerful. Now, part of this also deals with follow-up. All of these, by the way, these trainings here that were offered directly relate back to something in the evaluation tool. For example, CPALMS. CPALMS is an online tool that teachers can use to get ideas for lesson planning and how to break down the Common Core standards. It's put out by the state, so there was training on that. Edmodo, one of our own teachers, Tanya Taylor from Williston Middle, came out and trained teachers on how to use Edmodo, which is a technology tool with students. So we try to tie these in because that is a component, technology in the classroom is a component on the teacher evaluation. So everything had a purpose as we were going through our planning. As far as collection of data, remember I told you back on the Danielson, Domain 1 and Domain 4 are not things that you're going to see when you're sitting in a classroom taking notes. So there are different things that principals collect, such as the Individualized Professional Development Plan, or we call it the IPDIPI around here, where teachers set goals, and they are academic achievement goals for their students, and also professional learning goals for them as professionals. They present the results of their actions and their strategies that they implemented at the time of their final evaluation. They also collect lesson plans, professional development follow-up. We're in that process right now as a district, collecting follow-up for all of the teachers that have attended these trainings. We look at student data for each individual teacher and assessment data for different tests and things that are given. Formal observations where principals go in and spend complete lesson time with a teacher and they collect the data of what they're seeing going on in the classroom, and then classroom walkthrough data. That's where a principal or an assistant principal would walk through that classroom for 4 to 5 minutes and do a snapshot of the different elements that they're seeing based on the lesson model. Let's talk about that classroom walkthrough tool. You have a handout that has a list, and it looks just like this. It's very basic. This is actually a list of items that principals look for when they walk through a classroom. They're clicking to see whether it's present, whether it's not present, and they collect that information to help determine where a teacher falls in that spectrum when they're looking at domains 2 and 3. This form was revised last year to reflect more of what the principals needed to collect in order to make a more informed decision when it came to the final evaluation of teachers on the domains. So this had principal input based on the training that they've been through and based on the need to collect data to make more informed decisions. On the evaluation tool itself, we have categories of teachers. A Category 1 teacher is a teacher that is brand new to the district. It does not matter if they taught for 20 years in Marion County and they come to us. They are Category 1 because they are in a new district. They have a lot of things that they need to learn about the Levy County way of things. So they are assigned a mentor and extra support. They have multiple classroom walkthroughs, just like other teachers. They have 2 formal observations where the principal goes through an entire process of pre-observation conference, observation, post-observation conference, and then they also have 2 evaluations, a mid-year evaluation and a summative evaluation. Now, if they're here like maybe 2 years and they're a seasoned teacher and they no longer need that additional support of a mentor, we will drop them off and go ahead and move them to Category 2. That's if they're seasoned, but if they're brand new starting out, they get 3 years at Category 1 with extra support. By the time someone hits Category 2, that means they've had 4 or more years in the district. Most of our PSE teachers fall in this area, and the very few CC teachers that we have would fall in this area. That means that they are highly effective or effective teachers. They get one formal observation a year where they come in, they go through a pre-conference, an observation, post-conference with the principal. They have one summative evaluation, which is actually split in 2 parts, but we'll talk about that later. And then they also have the classroom walkthroughs. If a teacher scores a needs improvement or an unsatisfactory, we go back to assigning them a mentor to assist them, because we, at that point, feel like they're struggling and need some extra assistance. And so we go through 2 formal observations. We're in their classrooms more often to help them out. They have one summative evaluation. Instead of having a mid-year, they have one summative, but they do have 2 formal observations. Before we get into the student growth portion of the actual evaluation, I'd like you to take a look in your packet, and you will see a colored sheet like this. This is our work from the past and our work to continue, and for many years to come, I am sure. What you see here are a list of assessments that we use in our district to help get student growth or student proficiency scores for every teacher in the district. Now, the state of Florida has given us the goal of creating a test or finding a test for every course that's taught in the district by next year. So keep that in mind, because we'll talk about that work. But you'll notice that we have a lot of things in here that are national assessments. Then it's broken down to state assessments, including your FCAT, where we get band scores from the state. And then you also have proficiency assessments like the FCAT for 3rd grade. We don't have a growth score on that since it's their first year. So that's strictly by proficiency. And then you get down on the very last page, you'll see where we have local assessments that have been created by assessment teams through the district. And those consist of district level administrators working with classroom teachers who are working in that core area, assisting to make assessments that are rigorous and cover the benchmarks. And those are revised as needed with teacher input. So we have quite a few tests, but this is not a drop in the bucket to where we need to go. Remember I said by 2014-15 that the districts have to have an assessment for each teacher. So currently, we don't have a PE test. Currently, we don't have tests for like English 3, English 4 at the high school level, so we have a lot of work ahead of us. Now, if you take a look at the next handout in your packet that is folded, the first sheet you can just flip over, that's LEAs and where we are that we need to work on LEAs and help develop assessments to give teachers some input of where the students are currently so they know how to help them with end of course exams. But flip to the next page and you'll see the elementary section. These are classes that are taught in our school system right now that we do not have tests for. And so we have to find tests that will qualify for this. You'll notice that in some of these, for example, ELA, which is language arts, for first grade, kindergarten, first and second grade, currently we're using SAT-10. SAT-10 doesn't necessarily have a growth model, but we're going to work with NEFAC and SAT-10 and hopefully get a way to measure growth so we won't have to create some tests for ELA, math, and science and social studies that maybe we'll be able to use the SAT-10. However, you'll see there are a lot of tests, or a lot that need to be created. If you take a look at PE alone, because each one of these has its own course code or course description and skills, that would require separate tests for each one of those. The state has given us quite a task. Unfortunately, they didn't give us that high a budget to do it, but they gave us a task, and our race to the top monies are depleting. So we're looking at CFAC, DFAC, through the SEEK grant, the district instructional staff, and the help of many teachers to prioritize what tests we need that will cover the
What's the difference in the different colors, or is that just?
The color coding is that there are test bank items that we are aware of that are out there and that we could possibly pull from them to create tests. The others, at this point, we don't know that there's anything out there for us.
We purchased the, test bank item from Hillsborough County to that cost went up after we agreed to purchase it, but, it did not come back to us in a very useful form or fashion. And maybe, Dr. Manette would address that.
Couple of things. One, as far as the item banks, the state, through Race to the Top, they have their own set of deliverables in their timeline. They're behind their timeline. So as far as the items that they're going to release to us, they won't even be available until June. But this is all supposed to be in place by next school year. So I know that you will have a school board meeting coming up soon where you go meet with members of the legislature and talk with other school board members. On our behalf, if you could advocate for possible reprieve on the current timeline to have all these assessments developed by the beginning of the school year. Levy County is in the same boat as every other district in the state. If they don't even have the item bank available to us, it's difficult for us to write assessments ready for August. So that's one set of circumstances, but like Mr. Hastings pointed out with the Hillsborough item bank, Hillsborough created all these with the Gates money. They received the $100 million. They have released those items to Progress Testing, and Progress Testing is selling those items. But those items are not identified by benchmark. There'll be a lot of items, there'll be a lot of readings and information in there, but we'll still have to sort through it all to create all these assessments.
And what happens if, like, a school doesn't have art or doesn't have music?
Then they don't have to create that test.
Right. But currently, what you're looking at is a list of classes that we have right now in our district that are on the bell schedule.
We have a meeting tomorrow morning, and part of this is an MIS issue. Any course that looks like a duplicate but that has a different course code, we will streamline that so every course in our district that is offered, we will have that one course. If it's PE and an elementary has historically called it something, and another elementary has called it something else, through the course code directory because it's so diverse, we'll make sure there's only one of those, and then we'll only have to create one assessment for that. So we are going to take that list and consolidate it tomorrow. But beyond that, CFAC is a Central Florida Assessment Consortium. Kathy Lawrence has been working with them for the last 2 years. They have actually petitioned the state more than once to release the item bank. There's over 50 districts involved in it as a consortium trying to meet the needs of this timeline. So we are part of CFAC, and with DFAC, we're also working with the C grant to try to create these assessments. Everyone has the same concern. Superintendents have also expressed these concerns to the state.
Did you say the state is supposed to be developing some of that stuff too?
State was,
So,
yeah,
What's the chances that you think that happens?
they said that they're supposed to have it released to us where we actually have access by June. That basically gives us the summer to create over 400. And their item bank is limited to certain courses. It's not covering all the courses on our list. They only develop for certain courses.
So do you think that's gonna happen? You think the state's gonna get that done?
They'll give us what they have for June, but that's only going to address social studies, some courses that we do teach, but it won't address our electives.
No.
There are several courses that they did not create items for.
So what happens to us if we don't get this done? From the county standpoint, what happens to us?
Well, we plan to get it done this summer with teams of teachers. We will ask teachers to submit current test items that they have. We're going to work together as a team on this and collaborate, work with DFAC. We're going to do everything we can to get this done. We have a plan, we have days scheduled for the summer. We have the blueprint process in place. Barb and her team have created assessments already, and we have reliability to back those up. So as far as districts go, we're ahead of most districts. Even when they went to the workshop by the state, They used a blueprint that almost looked identical to ours. It could have been ours. And that's the blueprint we use to develop an assessment. We have the statistical analysis behind our items, we do item analysis. Of course, you revise, you look at items to see whether or not they're good items. It's a long process. Like Mr. Hastings has pointed out, the state has done this with Pearson. When they've created FCAT and they've created all of their EOCs, that has been a 3 to 4 year timeline of development with reliability and validity testing. And they're asking the district to put together all these assessments in a short amount of time. Now, they're saying that when you have Race to the Top money to produce these, the fact is they couldn't even meet their own deadlines with their item bank, and all the districts have been asking for support from them. That's why CFAC exists. That is a grassroots Central Florida Assessment Consortium. It started out as just a small group of Florida districts. It has grown to the whole state, from the Panhandle on down, are now members of CFAC. Because they're all saying the same thing. How are we going to do this?
But it would be helpful if they could be convinced to delay this requirement.
Please.
Absolutely. Where we had time to really develop tests that we felt were valid and reliable. Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, that doesn't seem fair. I guess life's not fair, I didn't count for everything.
That is a good way of putting it. Not to mention that our Race to the Top money has been depleted, and there's only one project that has any money left, and that's the STEM project, so.
One of the things that disappoints me, when we got into Race to the Top, you know, the state kept back, those were federal dollars, the state kept back half of it, and then dispersed half of it to the districts. I was under the impression that they were taking their half and doing these things for us, but it hadn't happened. And so, they still have a multitude, I think they have, I can't get an exact number, but around $200 million left out of the Race to the Top money at the state level. And they need to be using that to assist us.
Is this DOE controlled money or legislative controlled money?
DOE.
DOE.
Okay.
And so they have a reason for that, they tell you why?
You can't get a direct answer.
They don't probably don't think they have to tell them why.
Now, they have used part of their money, I believe, to train teachers on Common Core, and where they pulled teachers from across the state and they trained them on Common Core. But every time they change the core curriculum or any kind of curriculum, we have to go back to the table to match assessment. So it's a never-ending cycle.
They did use that money, for instance, world languages has been being developed now. They chose a district, Duval, to be the fiscal agent. They hire teachers throughout the state. So world language will be part of that item bank that will be released in June. That doesn't give us much of a turnaround for August. So that's an example, world language is one example that will be in that item bank. There are other subject areas that are in that item bank. But they did not address all the courses that we have in our course code directives.
They had $350 million to start with, and now they still are holding on to about $200 million, and we're out of our money. But they will use it for these summer trainings and workshops and all too. I mean, they got other things to do besides create tests, I understand, but still, I thought that was something they'd use it for and that it'd be done, and it's not. But we're working as hard as we can to make sure that we're doing the best job we can.
Well, let's take a look at what we do have and how we're using it. We're going to talk about student assessments and how we capture that data for teachers. And I have to say that one of the frustrations is that oftentimes when we talk about developing tests, it's not so much for the student's sake as it is for teacher evaluation. And so we already have a concern that our students are tested quite frequently. In fact, we probably have more teaching or testing days than we do teaching days in the second semester. But we have to figure out how we use this data once we do get tests for this. And so we're going to take you through a process of what we're doing so far. First of all, at the very beginning of the school year, once the classes are settled, we ask for a printout of the Bell schedule. And this is the master schedule that will tell us what each teacher is teaching and how many students are in their class. If they have less than 10 students in a course, then we don't consider that to be a big enough cell size to get a grade out of, so to speak. So we look for the number of students in classes and the classes that they teach. Then we correlate the courses that are taught with the tests that are available. For example, when we look at this sheet, and this is what we do, we sit down and we say, okay, we have someone that is teaching AP US History, and so for period 1, we're going to collect the results. They have 18 students in the class, and so that's going to be, if there's 6 classes, that's 1/6 of their evaluation, of their student grade portion. So we look at every period, we determine what tests we have, and we try to mathematically figure out what would be the fair way to show how much impact a student has, or a teacher has, on the students that they are assigned during the day. Once we do that, and we determine what percentage of the test will count, then we convey this information to the teacher. Now, this is done via phone conference or face-to-face with principals, where we go line by line down that schedule, and we talk about every teacher individually and what they're teaching. We talk about what tests we have available, what percentage will this test count for, what percentage will this test count for, and what percentage will this one. They may have 2 tests, they may have 3, they may have 1. It depends on what they're teaching. Particularly when you get into the high school area and you have someone with several preps, different courses, we try to capture each one of those. Once the principal has looked at it and we're all in agreement that that would be the most fair way to do that, then we convey the information to the teachers, and we have them sign an agreement form. You actually have a copy of that agreement form. It has changed as the years have gone on. And this agreement form, it has a date for the teacher to come in, they sit down, they talk with the principal, and they discuss the class schedule and what they're going to be evaluated on. Please understand that this is also up for discussion with the teachers, because if they say, you know what, I really think that this needs to be weighted more heavily than the other one, and this is why, we listen to those, and 99% of the time we change it. And we want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting what they're doing in the classroom, because we're looking at paper, they're looking at students, they know what they're teaching. For example, if we have someone that is doing industry certification, they might have 10 kids doing industry certification, but all day long they're teaching wheel classes. If they take a reading van for every student that they teach, because they'll go through class roster verification form, and we look at those students that they teach that are taking the LCAT, and we know that they're working with reading skills on that, it would help them to get that reading van score for those students, and add that to their industry certification, and it would give them a better chance at having more successful evaluation. And we let them know that the grade score is often much better than proficiency. And so we try to make sure that we give them some avenues to get extra points. If you notice at the bottom, we started collecting student growth data in 2011-12. So by this time, we have, or by the end of this year, we will have 3 years of student growth data on teachers that have been here since 2011-12. Unless something has happened, like maybe they took 8 weeks off because they have a newborn at the house, or maybe they had surgery and so they were out for a semester. If that's the case, then what we do is we do not give them a student growth data element for that year. So we're tracking this year by year for every teacher. So we're looking at the lead pattern and things like that as well, so we don't jeopardize them for having a life moment, especially if it's a FTE life moment, like having a baby that will eventually come to our schools, right? So we make sure that we give allowances for that. If a teacher has been in the district for 2 years, and they've got 2 years worth of data, then we look at last year's student growth data and this year's student growth data, and we will average it, and that's what's actually going to go on their evaluation. DOE had put that in legislation. I know they were behind that. But the reason why is to make sure that If a teacher has a bad year, then it doesn't hang with them forever, that it's averaged into the other good years as well. So there's a buffer in there. So once a teacher agrees to this form, that form is then kept in my office. It's safe at the school, but it's also kept in my office so I can verify that what they signed to is what we have agreed at the table with the principals, and so we're all uniform, and it goes onto a database. The database is kept, so at the end of the year, Barb will know what assessments to pull for each teacher. Let's talk a little bit about the evaluation tool itself. You have two of these actually in your packet. I gave you just two samples. These are both for Category 2 teachers. Quick quiz, who's Category 2?
4+ years.
4+ years in the district. In this particular form, one of them, if you look in the highlighted area, 60% of their evaluation is instructional practices and 40% is student growth. The other one is 50-50. Those that have been here less than 3 years get 60% in the 4 Danielson domains and 40% on student growth. But once we have 3 years of student growth, then it's 50% based on the Danielson domains and 50% based on the student growth. Okay? And what actually happens, let me escape out of this and I'll show you very quickly what a principal would look at. I'll look at a 60-40 spreadsheet here. It's all electronic and it has the formula in it. So what a principal would do once they sit down and determine, and say domain 3, the teacher is effective. They put an X in a box. Let's say domain 2, they have scored highly effective. Domain 3, let's just say that that is effective, as well as domain 4. You'll notice that alongside here, it's automatically calculating for principals. And it also took the score here, and it's giving it part of, or 60% over the overall student, or overall evaluation. Now, here's where it gets tricky. By the end of this year, the teachers are going to come in and they will know only domains 1, 2, 3, and 4. Because the student test results have not come back from the state. Once the state test scores come in, that's when we release all data. That way we don't have evaluations coming in and out at all times of the year. So once all of the data is in, then we'll release the student data. So by the end of the school year, the teacher will know only domains 1, 2, 3, and 4. By fall, because in the summertime, we receive the band scores. Well, they're saying it'll be in the summer this year, but usually it's been October when they release them. They will give us the band scores for FCAT. We'll have AP test scores that come in because they come in late. And we will have SAT 10 and all of those other test scores that we have on our list. They will be ready to go. And let's just say that the teacher gets an overall rating of a 3.25. And the principal types it in. Oops. And it automatically calculates, and it gives them an overall score of 3.28, and assigns the teacher an effective rating. At that point, the principal calls the teacher back in. This is the fall, beginning of the new year, and they review the overall rating. Now, the interesting thing about this is the cycle has already started for the following year. The principal by this time has already informed them of their evaluation process. They've already talked about professional development and their IPDIPI, or the Individualized Professional Development Plan. They've already started with classroom walkthroughs, and then they get their evaluation. Now, part of the problem with this, and we have discussed this with DOE, and that we've got to get this information sooner. One of the things that DOE has, or statute has now, that if I am a student and I am in a classroom and the teacher has been scored or has scored needs improvement or unsatisfactory, then for the next 2 years, the principal has to place me in an effective or highly effective teacher's classroom to make up for that year. But if I don't know that, and I'm a principal, how do I guarantee that I'm doing it? Other than classroom walkthrough, observation, informal assessments that we have and things like that, and I've got a ballpark figure. So it's another one of those quirky DOE things and legislative things that we're trying to work through and explain to them. Timing really is an issue. Are there any questions about the form before I go on? All right, I've already talked to you a little bit about the student growth calculation. If you have 1 to 2 years of student achievement data, then it's a 60-40 split. 3 or more, it's a 50-50. And I did tell you that if there's a time where a principal, or not a principal, but a teacher is out for a period of time, they don't get a student growth score for that year. So they may have taught for 3 years, but in one of those years, they've got a hole in their teaching for some reason, they may still be on a 60-40, strictly on an individual basis. The quick and dirty process at the school, we've talked a little bit about this. The principal presents the evaluation tool within the first 6 weeks of school. Each teacher develops their individualized professional development plan, or IPDIPI, and that's based on their needs as a professional and also looking at the students that are coming in. Perhaps the students are very low in a certain area and the teacher determines, you know, I'm going to work in this area on the professional development plan, and this is going to be my goal to get the students from here to here, and this is how I'm going to do it. So they can set some goals like that. Classroom walkthroughs are conducted, feedback is given to the teachers. Then, how much?
Well, I don't know yet, I hadn't decided how to ask a question. But that puts the teacher at a real disadvantage to me, because they don't know how they got to evaluate before school starts. I don't see how that's helping us a whole lot.
Well, they're going to know on the domains, on the teaching strategies and things that they can work on within the classroom. They're also going to know some things based on informal assessments or the LEAs and things like that, areas that they can work on. But as far as an overall, they're not. It's not ideal. It does not follow systematically like we would like it to.
And that's not fair to the teachers, it's not fair to the kids either.
No. And it makes the job for the principal very difficult when you're trying to build classes and things like that. All right, so we have pre-conferences that are held with each teacher. They actually have a form that they fill out so they can explain to the principal what they're going to see when they go in the classroom. The principal then goes in at a set time. They sit down for 40 minutes, maybe 45 to an hour. Sit down, they watch a complete lesson. They take notes on that lesson. They go back after that, and principals are saying that it can take 2 to 3 hours sometimes to review the notes and determine where does that fall in the Danielson evaluation. Where does what I saw fit in? The teacher writes a written reflection of the lesson that they taught. There's a form for them to fill out so they can reflect on what went well and areas that they feel like maybe they need to work on. They sit down together and they debrief on that observation and they share the impact on student learning. It's all about what is the impact on students. It becomes part of, it's not about me so much as what did I do that impacted the students the most? What kind of behaviors do I need to increase? This part of the process for a principal may take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours per teacher, including conferencing and reviewing their notes. Then the next...
You got 60 teachers, that's a lot of time.
That adds up. That does not count the classroom walkthroughs that they do. That does not count those little impromptu fire drills that they have because somebody pulled a fire alarm. There's it only encompasses that little tiny portion. And you're right, when you've got a large faculty, it's massive. So then the next fall, once we turn over the student growth data, once it's been calculated, put on a spreadsheet and averaged for them over either the 2 or 3 year growth scores, then the principal puts it on the form, they meet with the teacher, they have them sign the final evaluation. The principal sends the signed evaluations to the district office. They are input, the data is inputted into the Skyward system, so it can be sent to DOE, because DOE has to report on the evaluation findings by December to this Board of Education, State Board of Education. At the district level, the work that goes on, first of all, we work with each principal to determine what assessments will be used and what percentage of the, each assessment will be used to determine the student growth factor. We collect the teacher agreement forms. We create a database to determine which assessment outcomes will be used, so the MIS department can pull those. We also go through the roster verification process for the state and for the district test, and Barb sends those out. It's a very tedious project because the teachers are asked to look at their rosters and verify that the students were there. Both FTE counts, if they were not and they need to be removed, for example, if a child moved away or maybe a child was out for surgery or something like that, and they weren't there for both FTE counts, and we don't want that to count against a teacher. And so that child's name is removed, and only the data of the kids that qualify will be collected for each teacher. We collect the data as it comes in from the national, state, and local tests, as well as industry certifications. We create a file for each school that shows the student growth score for the current and past years, and we average it for the principals. Then we send it out to them and collect the evaluations and then put it into the evaluation survey. And that looks like it's the end, but I think it's just an ongoing process. But that is the end of my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Dean.
You're so welcome.
They have worked extremely hard, all of the instructional team and teachers and with union input to try to do this correctly, so that it's fair and we know how to do it. But it is very time consuming, very tedious work.
I do have one question, Ms. Dean.
Yes, sir.
What are the teachers saying about it? I mean,
I think they realize that it's very cumbersome too. It is stressful. It is different. The things that we look at today are probably more rigorous than what it was years ago when we were out and about in the classroom. A lot of them, I have to say that we've got a lot of good professional teachers in the district that realize that the things that are on the evaluation tool themselves are good practices, but it is stressful, very stressful.
thank you, John. Okay, Mr. Superintendent.
It was brought to our attention, I think Ms. Philpott may have brought it to our attention, that the Value Adjustment Board, the time in which we would elect board members to represent us, which is our legal obligation to do and appoint a business person, was not at a time that was conducive to be ready for the new season. So they have asked us to redo this at this present time so that whatever training may be, needs to be done for new people and so forth, that they would be ready to go. And so from this point on, the election of a value adjustment board member and the alternate and the business person would take place at this time. So what I'm asking is to serve during the 2014 calendar year through the February 2015 calendar year. I need for somebody to make the nomination. I'll turn it over to the chair to go with that.
Do I hear a motion to open nominations from the floor? Do I hear a motion? to open nominations. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any nominations?
What are these, what's the sheet that already has the names already on it? Are these past servers, or are these ones that we're anticipating serving now? And we just did not confirm them, so to speak, early enough?
Our position is we're supposed to have a person represent us on the Value Adjustment Board. And if it's Robert Philpott, or we want to go back to Paige Brookins, that's y'all's call. But, or maybe we want to promote Chris to the forefront of that. But that's up to you, sir.
Are there any nominations?
Let's see, at this point in time, then looking at the previous list and positions on there, I would nominate Chris Collins as the school board representative.
Is there any other nominations?
I move nomination cease.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, Mr. Cowart, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Congratulations, Mr. Cowart.
Congratulations.
Do I hear open the floor for nominations? One more time, please.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there a nomination from the floor from an alternate member?
I nominate Rick Turner.
Any further nominations? I hear a motion nomination cease.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All in favor, Mr. Turner, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Congratulations, Mr. Turner. You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, we also need to do the community business person, and Natalie Thomas has been serving on that for this year, and she has agreed to continue that capacity if it's the board's desire, or you may nominate anybody else you would like.
Let's have a motion, open nomination for,
So moved.
thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Nominations now open from the floor.
I nominate Natalie Thomas.
Is there any further nominations?
I move nomination cease.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of Ms. Thomas, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Ms. Thomas is our community business person. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see what we got going on. Approve of the minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes, Ms. Pam?
No, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Moving to the consent agenda. Mr. Ashmore, do you have any questions on the consent agenda?
I have a correction.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, Ms. Pam.
That's okay. On the consent agenda, page 1, under B, personal leave, Elena Barron, her leave will start March 10th. Instead of March 3rd, but the correct date should be March 10th. That's the only correction.
That's the only correction.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ashmore, any questions?
Well, I ain't gonna knock people for being a little late on there's two chief basketball team thing. Voting after the fact, that's acceptable with me. That's okay.
Sometimes you don't know yet.
Some things you just don't know,
Exactly.
but we anticipate
I think we should
that.
plan on that. That should
I
be.
plan on it again.
Each
I'm
coach
sure the
should
coach
plan
did,
on
but
that, so.
how would you feel if you sent them like in June?
Hey, you gotta have confidence in your horses.
Okay. Good deal, and I agree with that.
Just on the convert 12-month Title I secretary, parent teacher resource lab position, I take it Tanya is moving from here to there.
If you so approve.
Are we gonna need to get somebody there, or are we
Yes,
just
we will.
transferring somebody around?
It will be advertised, right?
That's it, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Ashmore. Mr. Cowell.
My questions have been answered, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cowell. Ms. Brooklyn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooklyn. Mr. Turner.
No questions at this time, Mr.
I have none either. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Mr. Superintendent?
One of those in Patrick County.
Yes, sir.
As y'all might have heard from a letter I wrote this week, the Times Union had filed a suit against the state of Florida to release the teacher BAM scores, and the Department of Education fought that as hard as they could, but the First Court of Appeals overruled and said that the state must release the teacher BAM scores. Well, when you release teacher BAM scores, you also release school BAM scores and district BAM scores. I believe in accountability, and I have no problem with a district BAM score being released or a school BAM score being released. I do have a problem with 1 year, current year, of teacher BAM scores being released. If we take 3 years to average them out because of hiccups that happen, then, and then in the evaluation of a teacher, it should be held for 1 year before it's made public record. So that would be the 4th year before a teacher's personal BAM scores would be released to the public. That is not going to happen as the court has ruled. And that upsets me greatly, but certainly it's beyond my control, and I think the Department of Education did all they could to prevent that too. But the law is the law, and we will follow the law. Well, we don't have to, they were released from the state. But in all of that, the good news is looking at the district, and in what was released in the Jacksonville Times Union paper was 6 pages, and these are the first 2 pages that you see here. And the reason I just copied the first 2 pages or have them presented to y'all is that that's where we're at the top. And so the one needed going to the bottom and sharing that unless you want to see it at some point in time. But if you'll notice by district, and I'm talking about by county, the Levy County in 11-12 came in 14th overall out of 67 counties. Now, I'm eliminating these individual schools like P.K. Young and the Florida school, Florida State School, and so forth. But if you look at complete districts for the 11-12 school year, Levy County was 14th, which puts us in the top 21% or the top quartile of the state in student growth measurements. And then for the 12-13, these are kind of mixed together, but you can see the data out there beside it. For the 12-13 school year, we came in 15th, and that put us at the 22nd percentile, again in the top quartile of the state. Now, I think student growth is a very good measurement. I like student growth because that shows you whether that student's moving or not moving or backing up. The way this thing works is, this ranking, is 0 is the state average. If you're at 0, that means you're at state average. If you have a plus number, that's the percent above state average that you are. So if you're like us with 3.44 and 4.05, that's 4% above the state average. And so being above state average has always been one of my goals as a superintendent, and because there have been many times when we have not been there in the past. Those that have negative numbers, they are below state average. And you don't see negative numbers on here because I didn't print out the bottom sheets for you. But certainly you can go to Jacksonville, Florida Times, and pull that information up yourself if you so desire. I hope that our local newspapers do not find it necessary to print the individual teachers' band scores. But if they do, there's nothing we can do to prevent. That would be certainly within their option. I just do not think it's fair to teachers to do that. And we try to be very fair with all student data, make sure that it's not disseminated out there so somebody can disparage a student. And I think for teachers, they deserve the same type of dignity that we give to students too. So I've got a real problem with doing that for teachers. I don't have a problem with doing it for schools or for this district, and because I think everybody should be held accountable. Ms. Dean just went over a very strenuous accountability system, and I would tell you that there's a lot of legislation this year to try to correct a lot of the legislation that has passed in the past, been previously passed. There you go. And you know, and a lot of it just makes absolutely no sense at all. For example, which Mr. Philpott was alluding to too, or addressing, was to do an evaluation on a teacher halfway through the next year. That does not serve a useful purpose. Well, Senator Lay, in his, I think it's Senate Bill 7060, he has addressed that we must have those during the summer at the latest, before the next school year starts. And hopefully, this legislation will pass. Now, of course, the legislation season just started today. Today's the first day. But we got a long ways to go, and a lot of amendments, a lot of committees, a lot of changes will take place. But his legislation certainly addresses that point, as well as should. Senator Mumford has a bill, which I think I disseminated to y'all, that tries to slow this train down with so many changes being thrown at the administration, at principals, at teachers, at everybody. It's just overwhelming for everybody. It's overwhelming for teachers. It's overwhelming for principals. It's overwhelming for this staff to try to do all that's necessary to get it state approved and acceptable, and then to present it, teach it, and get it disseminated. And so Senator Mumford has introduced a bill, legislation to try to slow that down. He recommends 3 years, which I think would be wonderful. I talked to him on a conference call Friday afternoon. He does not think it will pass in that fashion. He does think that maybe we'll get a 1 year slowdown. If we can get a 1 year slowdown this year, then we'll work on next year. And, you know, I would be happy with getting a 1 more year slowdown on all these mandates and requirements. But until that legislation passes, what we have is laws that are in place. And we have to move forward and work on those as diligently and as hard as we can. And that's what we're doing. But, you know, if enough people contact their legislature and encourage it, they listen to people. They don't, you know, us that complain all the time, they begin to turn a deaf ear to us. But
We don't get the squeaky wheel.
But if the public would get behind it, it would be very, very powerful. And they have. And that's driving a lot of this legislation to correct some of the things that have been put into place. The governor's budget has been published, and usually the governor's budget's a little bit high in the sky. And then the Senate and the House has their budgets, and then there's compromises and all that come together. So at this point in time, we really do not know what the what the dollar figures will be, what will be allocated for next year. All we have is the governor's budget at this point in time. A lot of, we have FTE audits, and I don't want to make an enemy out of an FTE audit person, but it seems to me that they give us a budget and then they spend the rest of the year trying to see how they can take the money back from us. And that's very disheartening, but we try to work through all that too. Questions?
Thank
That's all
you.
I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Tracy, when do you go up for like legislative sessions and things like that? Anytime, or is there a certain time superintendents go up or what?
We go up during our spring break, and I get to spend a spring break in Tallahassee with the legislators, but we'll be there.
Thank you. Board comment, Mr. Kerner.
Well, it is too, not as much as drastic or as enlightening as some of the superintendent was pointing out, but I had an opportunity, first part of last week, to visit a couple of elementary schools, and happened to be there at the exact time that the principals were conducting team meetings, and I was very impressed with the items that they were discussing, how the data is going to be being used, and data that already has been extracted, and how it is impacting what we've been talking about from Ms. Dean and others, student growth. And I was very pleased, and made me feel good.
Thank you. And I would like to comment on that. Now, Ms. Dean touched on too, is that while all of these mandates is just so overwhelming in the rapidity of movement, but overall, good teaching techniques and moving kids, that's good. I mean, who can say that that's not what we should be about? And so those things are good. It's just a matter of how to do it fairly with the teachers.
In both schools, individual students were being discussed. You know, they all had their laptops out, everyone in there, and they were looking at different grade level, but the individual students and what had been being done, what data had been collected, and best process, procedure moving forward with those individual students.
Yeah, that's going to drive the train.
Well, the individuality is what impressed me the most.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brookins?
I
Mrs. Brookins?
don't have any comments this time, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
Tomorrow is OH competition here in Bronson, so if you need something to do, tomorrow to that, I believe it'll be at the Baptist Church. And then also, I'm very thankful, so saw on that nasty Facebook that one of our teachers, and in cooperation with the principal and Central Florida Electric, we had a osprey nest that got replaced. They had taken a old power pole out there, so if you get a chance, go down to Cedar Key. The ospreys have come back, and so it's a pretty unique thing that our students get to take a chance. And don't forget, legislative days are the 19th and the 20th. So I'm setting appointments on the 20th, so hopefully we can all be there.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Mr. Dad?
First of all, I want to thank everybody that participated at the Bronson FFA Food Fest. They raised a pretty good bit of money that night. The figure was almost $3,000 off just cakes alone, which was pretty impressive. I don't know what their take-home tickets was, but that's pretty good. The only other thing I have is, many of you know that at Bronson Elementary School, they have a backpack program where they send non-perishable foods home with kids who might go hungry. A group of volunteers are trying to restock the shelf, for lack of a better term, because it is depleted. And in talking with a couple of individuals at the school, they said that Bronson Elementary School had kind of been an offshoot of a grant that Alachua County had to fund that program, but that money has run out. And the person they were talking to said that they don't know of any grants out there. Well, this group of mamas got to looking, and there's several grants out there that will help fund that program, possibly countywide. But they are wondering who would be a good contact person at the county office to help with the grant writing process of that. These mamas don't have a clue how many kids are in school, all that, they just want to help, and those kind of things. Naturally, they have volunteered at Cameron National Insurance Agency as a drop-off point, if anybody wants to leave a non-perishable food item. But they have found several grants through Walmart, Capital City Bank, and a couple other places that are available and are available to us and qualify for, but they don't know how to go about writing grants properly. So who would they need to talk to here?
A grant like that, we might think about our social workers. Ms. Terry Cole might be a good contact. I think they would be the ones to get those backpacks to the right kids, and I know that Terry and Gail Corn have done a good job.
Well, one lady in particular, she is a retired dietitian with some university, I can't remember what university, I know at the University of Florida. But no, somewhere up north. And has had that connection and those kind of things, and she really took a lead on that and talked to me, and I said, well, I don't know anything, but I know some people.
We can get the data together and just put them in contact with us and we'll.
You got it, you got it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir.
I have one question. I've heard rumors that Wolf Knox is going to 6 periods next year. Is there, can you explain the justification for that? I mean, I don't know if you have to do that or not, but why?
Well, that was at the school's request. They have, in their mind, way too many kids that are office aides, students that are seniors that only have 1 or 2 classes that walk the halls and have no place to go. And, but that's what my intention is for Philpott. If you recall the old days when we were there, we had other classes that had extra periods, and we'll do that again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else? Okay, declare a recess for 7 minutes.